Lawful Grand Rising, TikTok Police, welcome, welcome. Hope everybody is doing good. Yes, sir, welcome, welcome. Lawful Craftmasters JA. Welcome, welcome. We are about to continue the momentous journey. Well, we soon talk about signatories class. But for now, we need to take care of some of these other matters. So, we're going to, I've got too many things open. Gonna get started shortly. Wait for the late birds to come in. Alright, close out that. What is this? Alright, that is good. Close that. Close out this too. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. And get rid of this so that we can focus. Alright, so let's see where we're at. So, so we're going to talk about the new section. Lawful Grand Rising, Justin. Wagwan. You see, I came across something, you see, and I was pleasantly surprised, I must say. Pleasantly surprised. But at the same time, I can't say I'm fully surprised, because one thing I've come to learn is that Jamaica is not alone. Lawful Grand Rising, Kim. Welcome, welcome. What Jamaica is going through, it is not unique when we talk about the world stage. You ever hear them talk about the world stage? Yeah, the world stage is literally a stage. Because especially the colonial remnants especially those are still influenced by the colonial past. And we cannot blame our ancestors. We cannot blame everybody. We have to move forward. Incompetence, right? Grand Rising, Blasmin. Welcome, welcome. Blasmin, send me a message on TikTok or Telegram, and we can work through that issue. Yeah, we can work on the signatory issue offline. Right? So Jamaica is not unique to the colonial history that has been embedded into the very fabric of our everyday lives. So we are not unique in that sense. But at the same time, that is not an excuse to remain within the colonial framework. Right? And it's funny because I have been talking about the Jamaica Constitution as a framework for quite some time. And I was surprised to see that before America, let me take off the music I know. Before America gained its independence, drafting its own constitutions, they called the previous constitutions frameworks. Let me say that again. America, before it gained the independence of the states, before the United States, let's talk about American history. Because remember, America also has a colonial past. They considered the constitutions that were early drafted to be colonial frameworks. They did not really consider them to be a real constitution, because if they are going to be building a nation, you cannot build it from the rubble of what you had before. You have to build it, you have to start a new foundation. Lawful Damien, welcome, welcome. If you are going to build a nation, right? Yes, you want to look at examples of others that have done it properly, others that have done something, that you can see to be beneficial. But you don't build from the rubble of what you just destroyed. It's just like if you have one old house for one piece of property. You don't just lick down the wall and start build back on the old foundation. It don't make sense. It don't make any sense. So it's the same thing when we talk about drafting a new constitution. You cannot build on colonial framework. Right? If you build on colonial framework, you're going to end up back in the same problem that you just tried to leave. Right? So when people talk about how powerful America is, and how America is a kind of almost like a role model for other countries, you have to realize what mistakes they avoided and how they overcome those mistakes. What did they do right? That is what we have to look at. We now look upon to say we are going to copy everything that they do, but obviously they did something right, because they were able to build a nation over time that have withstood the test of time. Right? And that is what we need. And just like we say here, right? We have a better chance of restricting constitutional change than to allow the Constitution to be so wide open, not only to interpretation, but to arbitrary change every single time we have problems, right? We limit all of the powers to the Constitution, so the people will always have the final say in whether or not the laws remain the same or they change. Because I can tell you that I have also been doing some research as it relates to current places that have constitutions that were recently changed. And it is diabolical. Okay, that's all I can say. Diabolical. These places are suffering because of what was allowed to take place without the, I guess you can say, without the approval of the people. Diabolical. The government is like a parasite in their side. So, much of those things can be avoided if we learn from those mistakes as a people. Right? Again, I am not a lawyer, I am not an attorney, I am not providing legal advice. Anything I say is my own opinion. This is not an anti-government page, this is not an anti-police page. This is simply lawful discussion which may be educational for some. Lawful Kimar, welcome, welcome. Right? So, what is the topic of the day? It is the same topic we are continuing from the past. The past 3 lives that we've been doing, which is we are recrafting, or we are crafting a new constitution. That is what we are doing. Okay. So we are going through the different sections, and at the end of it, as we get suggestions on what we want to include, exclude, change, modify, etc., we are going to be including those as we go along. Well, after we have crafted the original draft. Right now we are still in draft mode. So we have not even gotten to version 1.0 of the Constitution yet. So I'm going to update the site so that we can use the website as our review platform. And I will also update the draft document link so that those who want to follow along, you can follow along as well. So let's update this. Let's save this. And we're going to update our documents. Let's put this. Let's see if we have the right place. Documents, and let's update this. All right, so let us also make a PDF version for those who might have a problem with the Word version, maybe on their phone or on the computer. We're going to make a PDF link so that we can continue lawfully, right? So let us update that right now. Draft document. Let's do PDF edition. Let's get this. And let's change that one. Let's save it. and then we are going to test it. So let's copy this link. Let us test the link and then we're going to get started. PDF edition. Alright, so we have an issue there. Oh, when I upload it, of course it's not going to work if we don't upload our PDF edition. Alright, so let's try that again. Let's go back, refresh, and let's try that. Alright, good. So there we go. All right, so welcome back, everyone. We are going to continue our draft of our new constitution, right? So we are going to head over to the computer and we are going to continue our draft framework. So this is voiceofjamaica.com. If you scroll down, the first post says new constitution, right? And then here we have the constitutional draft. I should put the PDF here as well, but we're going to be viewing it from the website. So we're going to go here, Constitution and Bill of Rights. And here we have the PDF edition, right? So we can review it from the website, but the PDF is a little bit more flexible as far as the Zoom is concerned for the live. So let's work from our PDF edition, right? And here we have our current draft. So we have a new section we're going to review today, right? So if we scroll down, we get to our Article 2. Last time we went over Article 1, and today we're going to go through Article 2, which covers the courts, legal process, and access to justice. Now, some of this is going to be a little bit similar to what we currently have in the Jamaica Constitution, Order and Council 1962, but it's also going to be drastically different, right? So again, this is a framework. This is what we're working with as a draft. And if you have suggestions, if you have additions, if you want to add something to it, if you or if you just like something, you can also make your submissions, right? On the same constitutional page here, right? When you scroll down to the bottom, I think I probably need to put the form at the top because this document is getting rather large. But if you want to make a submission, you scroll all the way down and here you have the form to make your suggestion for any constitutional inclusion that you'd like to add. And we will post it on the site. Here we have one submission already. So as we get more submissions, we're going to add them to the site, okay? All right, so let's get back to our constitutional draft. So let us go down to Article 2. Here we have Article 2. See if we can zoom in a little bit. Yeah. See if we can align it to our screen. Okay. So Article 2 is a system of law and justice, which covers the courts, legal process, and access to justice. So Section 1 is the foundation of justice. Justice in Jamaica shall be open, fair, and accessible to all people. Courts exist to resolve disputes, protect rights, determine facts, and enforce the law established in this Constitution. The justice system shall operate without fees to commence or defend any claim in civil or criminal matters. Now, let us talk about this for a second. In today's day and age, not only do we have the barrier of not comprehending what is happening in court, we also have a cost barrier. We have fees that are associated with actually going to court to defend yourself or to bring a claim. despite the fact that our tax dollars are being used to run the courts, we are still being forced to pay a fee to bring a claim or to defend against a claim. And that is absolutely wrong. There is no way we can fund a system as a people, and then the same system is now requiring that we pay a fee to bring a claim or to defend against a claim in court. If that is not colonial injustice, I don't know what it is. So we now have a chance to eliminate those fees and not subject ourselves to arbitrary robbery. Okay? Because at the end of the day, if it was not our court system, I could say, okay, it is not ours. So therefore the fee is justified for them to run their system. But if we are running our court system, or the court system is running off of our tax dollars, we should not be paying a fee as independent, local, indigenous citizens of our own country. Okay? So, 3, this is why we put this in here. The justice system shall operate without fees to commence or defend any claim or in civil or criminal matters. We should not have a barrier to justice. The fee structure is a barrier or a hurdle to justice. See it? 4, no person shall be denied access to a court because of lack of money or social status. Again, reinforcing the fact that if we the people own something, we should not be extorted to defend ourselves or to bring a claim. Section 2, structure of the courts. Right? The lawful courts of Jamaica shall consist of 1, the Supreme Court of Jamaica. 2 national courts of appeal. It is not feasible to just have one. We know that the island small, but it don't make sense we keep it in the middle. Cut it in half, one on the left, one on the right. Parish courts of civil and equity jurisdiction, right? We cannot have the parish courts determining criminal matters. It does not make sense. Jamaica is spelled like that because we are not trying to modify anything with the current name. It sounds like you miss the other classes or the other lives. The name Jamaica is a brand. The name Jamaica is not the island nor we the people. So we can use whatever name we deem fit. So the parish courts should only be dealing with civil matters or equity matters. Equity matters is considered matters dealing with property or matter dealing with fairness, right? Matter dealing with things that are not black and white. Civil matters obviously are disputes, basic disputes that concern matters of the law, right? Somebody thieving something, somebody encroaching on somebody's property, etc., etc. Those kind of matters are what the parish courts are supposed to deal with. We cannot have criminal matters where someone could be sent to jail be handled by a simple parish court. Those courts of criminal jurisdiction, right, should be separate from civil courts, right? So how about one appeal court per county? I think we should abolish this county business. We should simply have parishes or call it something else. I don't think we should have counties. But again, it is all based on majority support. This is not, I am not here to dictate what we should do. This is going to be a collaborative effort of the people. If it is something that the people want to implement, then hey, everybody put a vote on it, and then the majority wins. We just make it that way, right? So all suggestions are good suggestions. So anybody who wants to make a suggestion, they can submit it on voiceofjamaica.com. And we're going to make it more accessible so that people don't have to click around to find a way to submit their opinions or their suggestions. No other courts shall exist unless created by constitutional amendment. What does that mean? It means that if the Constitution already said these are the 4 types of courts that should exist, no court in its own rules, because remember, the Constitution alone have the laws. So a court itself cannot come up with a rule to say, okay, we're going to make a quasi-court. Zin? It don't make any sense to allow the courts to have that power. It don't make any sense to allow bureaucracy to have these power to create additional courts or to define jurisdiction. The Constitution should be the only place where we find what is lawful and what is not. So if we see a next court pop up in the country, we know say it's not a lawful court. Right? All right. Section 3, the Supreme Court. We're going to cover the matter of tickets when we are done with our constitutional draft. So you got to hold those questions for the end part, if you are still here. Section 3, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court shall be the highest judicial authority of Jamaica. A lot of people still don't know that the current Supreme Court in Jamaica is not the highest court. The Privy Council in England is the current highest court in Jamaica. And that again goes to show that we are under the colonial remnants of slavery time. Okay? So if we're going to create our own system of government and our own courts, it is only logical, it is only legally foundational that we maintain our full judicial system. We cannot have an external force determining the fate of the people of our country. So the Supreme Court shall be the highest judicial authority of Jamaica that maintains that we keep our power within our own country. 2, the Supreme Court shall interpret this Constitution. 2, resolve disputes between institutions of government. 3, review decisions of the Court of Appeal. D, determine questions affecting the fundamental rights of the people. Right? So, if you notice, it does not say this is a court of original jurisdiction or a court of general jurisdiction. Right? It is specific in its function. Because of the importance of this court, we cannot have this court bogged down with basic matters. This is why the Supreme Court exists, to deal with matters of paramount importance, right? So if something is affecting the government, if something is affecting the Court of Appeals, if something is affecting fundamental rights, similar to what we have today, then the Supreme Court would be the court to bring those kind of matters in, right? 3, decisions of the Supreme Court shall be final and binding. So when the Supreme Court makes a decision, you cannot appeal that decision. We cannot have a circular thing going where you bring a matter to the Supreme Court, then it gets appealed to the appeals court and then possibly come back to the Supreme Court. That should be abolished. If the Supreme Court, in its fair determination, determines that something is supposed to be this way, that is where it stops. No more litigation past the Supreme Court. Right? Section 4, the Court of Appeal. 2 national courts of appeal shall exist. Again, this is a framework. So the people will ultimately decide how many appeals court we have. Right? So, 1, A, Court of Criminal Appeal, and B, Court of Civil and Equity Appeal. So, even though we say 2 national courts of appeal exist, the Court of Appeal has both criminal and civil jurisdiction, but it is split inside of the court. Meaning, 1 court, but you have different divisions within the 1 court, a division that handles criminal and a division that handles civil and equity. Right? These courts shall review decisions from the parish courts. Very simple. 3. Appeals must focus on A. Errors of law, B. Procedural fairness, and C. Sufficiency of evidence. That's it. Right? Again, it is similar to what we have today, but it is clear, it is simple, it does not have this big whole section and paragraph about something that people might not even care about. Right? So very clear appeals focus. 5. Parish courts. Each parish shall maintain 2 courts. Parish criminal court, responsible for criminal trials, determining guilt or innocence. C. Issuing lawful punishments as defined by this constitution. Very important. Issuing lawful punishments as defined by this constitution. So what does that mean? We take away judicial discretion. The courts cannot have their own opinion on what they should implement as punishment. It does not make... That is where corruption comes from. Because now the court can rule on something that is not defined in law. Or they are ruling based on their own opinions. If we do not take away that discretion from the court and only allow the courts to determine punishment based on the law, that is where the people start crying injustice. That is where injustice comes from. So we take away that power and we direct all of their responsibility to the Constitution. That's it. Parish Civil and Equity Court, responsible for property disputes, commercial matters, contract disputes, family matters, equitable remedies. Right? So, I think there should be a separate court here for family matters, because those kind of things are so important that we cannot have someone or a judge that is typically dealing with other basic matters or other serious matters now have to sit down and change their mindset to deal with family matters. So we would possibly need a court or a division within the parish court that strictly handles family matters, right? Because we can't have somebody with a schizophrenic or a changing mindset as it considers as it concerns family matters. Anne-Marie says, sir, you need to advise yourself fully before you speak about taking away judge's discretion. Well, Anne-Marie, you need to come to class early so that you don't come in and disrupt the class with foolishness. Okay? Anyways, proceeding. Parish courts shall serve as the primary courts for resolving disputes, right? So much of the disputes that typically go to a court are civil matters, right? Civil matters are voluminous in nature. That is the bulk of what we're typically going to see, apart from traffic matters, right? Which again, we will get into that later on, how we handle those situations. Section 6, open courts and public records. 1. All courts shall be open to the public. This is plain and simple, right? We cannot be blocking people from entering the court. Just because you don't have court that day, that is not a reason to turn you back from entering a courtroom. We, as the owners of government, and we as the owner of our institutions of government, cannot be turned away from the very thing that we create. It does not make any sense. Zin? So all courts shall be open to the public. No restrictions. Obviously, if we have sensitive things like family matters, you know, that can be somewhat restricted or somewhat confined where we have anonymity of the names of possibly minors and so forth, or in-camera proceedings for certain things, but we cannot exclude the public from knowing what's going on in the courtroom. The court should not have anything to hide. Okay? 2, every court proceeding shall be recorded through audio recording, video recording, and written transcription. As a matter of fact, nowadays, we actually can use AI for transcription. It is not widely used at the moment, but we typically do not need an individual to write transcripts anymore. That is a good use of AI. Zin? We should no longer have court proceedings that we don't know what happened in the court. It is absolutely ridiculous. Look how many years now we have access to audio recordings and video recording devices. Look how long now we have access to storage. Look how long we have had access to this kind of technology. At least 15 years. And we still have that problem in Jamaica right now. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. But anyways, moving forward. So every court proceeding shall be recorded, right? Which means that it is a must. There is no discretion here. If, for example, if someone has a problem with, let's say, judicial bias, right? There should be no question of how we would go about determining that. We simply review the audio or the video, right? We simply put out an audio or we look at the audio or the video, and that reviewing tribunal would be independent of the courts, right? That is the other problem we have. We cannot have the same body of government reviewing itself. The people needs to have independent review and enforcement mechanisms. That way, you can never have corruption, because corruption only exists where you have people judging themselves, people taking things into their own hands. Colin Cupid said, but the judges will put out a judgment after the cases had concluded. I don't know what that means. Number 3, records of court proceedings shall become part of the permanent public record. Exactly. The records of the court are not property of the court. And again, the courts are temporary, so they cannot own anything. The same thing with the government. The government is temporary. Government cannot own anything. So all of the records that are produced from court proceedings are property of the public. We, as the people who put these things in place, these infrastructures in place, we put these people to work, we give them employment, we put all of these institutions into motion. Zin? It is clear that it is we, the people, who are the rightful owners of this public record. And therefore, we are the ones who shall have access to the permanent records. Right? Court records shall be stored and maintained under national record preservation laws. Right? So this is another section of law that will protect the people from any kind of bureaucratic corruption, where sometimes in some systems we have public officials trying to modify and corrupt the public record, right? Trying to backdate things, trying to do things under the table. We eliminate that if we have a national record preservation system. So the courts would not have direct access to any of these records other than review only. So if something is entered into the record, if something is recorded from the court have access to download and to review and to check the records, but they would not have right access once the record has been created. They cannot go back and change anything. There would be no such thing as correction. You simply supplement. You can add another document. Keep on adding, right? But you cannot go in there, boy, yeah, change nothing. Nobody can approve no change. We want to see what the mistake was, why you even submit a supplement to the record, right? That is how we get rid of corruption. The Constitution should be an evolving system to accommodate the changes that are a natural part of cultural shift. Well, that is true, and we covered that in previous classes, but again, maybe you weren't here to see what we covered. But everybody have access to this document. This draft is public. You can get it on voiceofjamaica.com, and you click on the first post, and you get access to the constitutional draft. A judgment is the final binding decision of a court signed by a judge. That is not true, Colin Cupid. The judgment of a court is final only if there is no appeal, and only when the lawful time frame has passed for an appeal. Otherwise, someone can always appeal to the appeals court, and if they are still not satisfied, they can appeal again to the Supreme Court, which then becomes the final judgment, right? Okay. Section 7. Privacy in sensitive cases. 1. In cases involving minors or family matters, the courts may limit the publication of identifying information. Again, this is logical. We don't want the names or identification information of, people who are in private family matters, right? These kinds of things are obviously sensitive. So people might get aliases or something to suffice, identification in the court, but not identified by members of the public, right? In such cases, individuals may be identified by first name only in public records. So, we can come up with whatever identification, is appropriate in these cases, right? So we can use first name, we can use first initial, last initial, etc., etc., right? Section 8, right to representation. Any person may represent themselves in court. 2, any person may appoint another individual to assist them in presenting their case. You notice it say, any person may appoint another individual, right? It never say you may appoint another attorney. It never say you may appoint a lawyer. It never say you might appoint counsel. It say another individual. That means that you don't need to have someone who is going to charge you money to help you represent a case. Now, again, we're not undermining the legal profession, right? But not everyone that goes to school is, because, again, you cannot guarantee a win in court. No attorney can guarantee that you will win. They can look at a case and say, well, this has a good chance of winning, right? But that does not mean you're going to win. You can still get an attorney and lose. So, for someone who is going to fork out much in hundreds of thousands for an attorney, and you are not guaranteed a win, that is a disadvantage. If you can make the choice of using someone who you know is competent, you should have the choice of determining who may assist you or who may represent you in your case. That should not be confined to the legal profession. Obviously, there are advantages of getting an attorney because they would have studied the law, right? And they can bring up things in the law that others may not be able to present in such a manner, right? So, it should be strictly up to the individual in the case to determine who they want to assist or represent them in court. Michael said, would that be making a distinction between individual and person? Yes, 100%. 100%. When we use, and again, there's going to be a definition section as well, right? Because in today's day and economy, we have the term person describing many things. It is describing corporations, is describing legal fictions, and it's also describing people, right? So we are going to be having definition sections where in things that talk about, for example, actions, right? It is always in reference to people. Corporations must be strictly identified, right? So if someone is representing a corporation or someone is bringing an action representing a corporation, the use of the term person in that case would have to be identified by the name. So for example, it would say any corporate person or any legal fiction person. It would not simply say any person. So that would be in the definition section of the Constitution, right? 3, the use of licensed attorneys shall be optional. Obviously, the forcing of people or making it mandatory for people to get licensed attorney is unlawful. If we are a people of free will, that means that we have 100% free will, as long as we're not breaking the law. And we cannot have a law forcing people to get attorneys. Because obviously, if an attorney goes to school and they spend these amount of years getting their degree or their privilege, then obviously they have to charge a fee. They have to make a living, right? So we are not getting rid of that. But at the same time, we are not forcing people to say you have to get an attorney to go into court. It is ridiculous, right? Anyways, number 4, courts shall provide trained legal assistance for individuals facing criminal accusations who request assistance. Now, why do we have something like this, right? Where the courts shall provide trained legal assistance? Because not everybody is going to know the law. Not everybody is going to read through and comprehend everything that's in there. So in a case where someone is confused or someone does not have the legal training, the court should simply provide someone who can assist them in their case. And that individual who is provided is paid for by the state, right? It's paid for by taxpayer dollars. And that individual should not be disadvantaged because neither can they pay or they're of a certain status, right? Even if you can manage and get your own attorney. That does not mean you cannot ask the court to provide an attorney to let you better comprehend what is happening and to assist you in your matter, right? It is a part of the legal system, so you should not be charged whether or not you can afford an attorney or not. You can ask for, a legal professional from within the court to assist you in your case. And they have to do so lawfully, right? Section 9, rules of evidence. Courts shall determine cases based on evidence presented in open proceedings. I'm sure there are many people with examples where no evidence is provided, yet still the court is asking the accused several self-incriminating questions, including guilty or not guilty, which is atrocious. Because when someone is bringing a claim in court, it is not the accused that is questioned, especially not initially. Someone can only be questioned after evidence has been presented that somehow identifies some basis for reasonable belief that a crime was committed, right? So if there is nothing there, someone can't admit guilt of something without evidence in front of them. Like, we can't even break it down in a more simple fashion. If there is no evidence to support a claim, the court should not even proceed to bring in the defendant. That case should be quashed right away. Evidence should be the basis of any claim. So just because the police write up one information one accusation or a ticket, that should not mean that someone get dragged into court. The police should first answer. The police should first put forth the evidence necessary in order for the case to start. Right? Anyways, number 2, evidence must be documented. B, verifiable. C, subject to questioning. I think that is self-explanatory. C, or number 3, hearsay or unsupported allegations shall not determine judgment unless supported by corroborating evidence. Right? Disclosure required by law is the mandatory release of Right, so evidence should not be something you ask for in a discovery. Right? Evidence should be mandatory from the start. So if you are supposed to go to court for whatever reason at all, anything that the accusing party has should already be produced and put into the record before they can serve you. That is how a fair system of justice begins. And that is how you get rid of these long years worth of cases. Right? If you don't have the evidence in the first place, you cannot charge someone. It should be that simple. Anyways, let us move forward. Section 10, judicial duties. Judges shall, 1, remain impartial. 2, what does impartial mean? Means that they should be in the middle of any controversy. You cannot be on one side or the other. Right? Exactly, like being convinced of a crime without a crime. Exactly. So when a judge is impartial, that means that they are simply hearing the discussion and then they weigh the discussion as it relates to the law. Right? So judges shall remain impartial. 2, apply the law written in this constitution. And this is rather important. We cannot have a system of law where people have to be scrambling and looking all over the place to find what is the law. The law should be in a single location. So if anybody within society want to know what the law is, they can simply open the Constitution and that is the entire body of law. Case closed. So when it comes to the judges applying the written law to the case, it is simply what is in the Constitution. That is what they should be using as the weighing factor of whether or not someone is guilty or not guilty, or someone is responsible for something or someone is not responsible. Right? 3, base decisions strictly on evidence presented in court. Now, I think this is a very simple 3-way test, right? The judge should be impartial, and that will be shown by the record. Remember, you know, it is one of the reasons why people bawl injustice nowadays is because there is no record in most cases, or the record is not complete, right? It is only what is written down. So to eliminate that, right, now we have complete records of every proceeding. And then on top of that, the judge has 3 criteria to use in his ruling or in his determination or his judgment, right? Judges shall remain impartial. You cannot be on any side. B, you apply the written law in the Constitution. So you cannot apply the law based on common law or previous rulings. You have to base every single case on the Constitution itself. So that means you cannot come with judicial discretion. You cannot come with, oh, well, we ruled on this before and we ruled in this case that such and such. No, that has no bearing on the Constitution. The Constitution is the law that you use to gauge the case. Very simple. And you base decisions strictly on evidence presented. So if someone come and they have a claim and they don't have evidence, The clerk should stop them right there. The clerk is going to be the same gatekeeper, but now they will have consequences when they allow someone to serve someone without meeting the prerequisites of evidence. Right? We start having penalties for people doing foolishness, because it not only hurts the legal system or the judicial system, it hurts the individual who has to take time off from work. It hurts the individual who have to pay for gas, pay for taxi, possibly leave their children at home or get a babysitter and all them something. It is a long streak of disadvantage for someone who is wrongfully accused or wrongfully have to come to court. Someone has to pay for that. So we have to make punishment on both sides of the fence. Right? Right now, which government is or which member of the public service is getting punished for their mistakes? When a case gets dismissed, right, or the claim is withdrawn, who pays? Nobody. So that individual who had to go through that entire process of getting served and have to go to court and take taxi and pay for fare and pay for gas and all them something there, nobody pays for none of those expenses. Your case get dismissed and some people are happy about that. Right? And again, exactly, that is why some people pay the ticket rather than go to court, because you are expending more and nobody is going to be held accountable. There is no equity. There is no equity. Right? So we have to remove those barriers to justice. Right? When people know that they are going to be held accountable, that is when they will do their job. Right? In the recent guilty plea and subsequent conviction of Silvera, the majority of evidence was not true. Examined, so evidence is only useful to a point. Well, here's the thing. As I said before, you cannot have a case started and you are still gathering evidence. It is absurd. It is ridiculous. It is legally incomprehensible. If there is a case, for example, and again, I can't get into things that I don't have full knowledge of, but we're going to use a theoretical example. If we have a case where someone was unalived, right, and the police go in and they are doing their investigation and all that stuff, right? Number one, if you hear say it is an unaliving, you're supposed to already have a team, an investigatory team, that go in immediately and go and assess the situation and gather evidence, right? Fingerprint, samples of this, etc., etc., etc. Right? You cannot have a case with ongoing investigation weeks and months and even years later. Them a try capture evidence. That in and of itself is absolutely, I cannot find the sense, whether legally nor morally, in those kind of situations, right? You gather the evidence that is there at the time, and you gather the evidence up to 30 days. You have to put a time frame on it. You cannot allow the legal system to go out there fishing and fishing and fishing and fishing. It is ridiculous. Once you get to your time frame, all of the evidence you gather, that goes directly into the court record. You cannot have these investigatory agencies sitting there on evidence for years and years. And a matter of fact, if you really get into the basis of some of these cases and you say, show me the chain of title for this, show me the chain of title for that, what happened from you captured the evidence up to the time it was submitted to the court? I am pretty sure many of those cases you will have a broken chain of title. I'm not going to get fully into all of that, right? But you have to have a cutoff point. You have to have specialized teams. There isn't so much unaliving on the island that you cannot have 3 or 4 set of teams that can be readily available. So when something happens, they immediately go on site, they take the time that they need, and then they gather all the information and get it to the court. We don't have that many unalivings every single day or every single week to be inundated with these things. So if something like that happened, why is the evidence being kept and being shuffled around for so long, all the way up to years before a case can be heard? It is foolish. And that is just my humble opinion. If we limit the time to collect evidence to 30 or 60 days, once that time comes, trial for start. We cannot have these things being put aside. And on top of that, all of these criminal cases, it is the people, it is a trial by jury that's supposed to happen. And all of this foolishness about you have to be instructing the jury about this, instructing the jury about that. You get rid of that foolishness. Get rid of that. You simply state to the parties how they can present their evidence, and that's it. The jury is supposed to have a free mind, just like the judge. Just like the judge. You see, me see them start report the live. I'm not going to report the live, man. Soon start drop the jewels. Soon start drop the jewels. Anyways, let us proceed. All right. So we have the 3 criteria that we should allow the judge to use to determine cases, right? And again, we're not having single judges determine many matters, right? We have a tribunal. So you don't have a single judge determining the fate of an individual. Judges shall not create new law through interpretation. And this is what we mean by we abolish common law. Just because a ruling was made on a certain matter, right? Exactly. If judges fail to sit on a case and they don't have an extenuating circumstance like, sickness or something, right? Or unless they need to recuse themselves, then that's a different story, right? But in any case, if a judge fails to sit and there is no extenuating circumstance, then they absolutely should face punishment. Everyone who is a public servant, they have to have punishment and rules and limits. Nobody should be left to just free will if you are in a job. You have free will when you come a road and you now work for somebody, that's different. But once you are in public duty, you should always have consequences for any action or inaction when you should be following the law. So we cannot allow common law to dictate what should be ruled on in a case, because then we have absolute prejudice. How can we have fairness if we're going to be repeating what another judgment said? We can, again, a determination based on previous rulings should be outlawed. Common law should be gotten rid of. Every case should turn on its own facts based on the Constitution, not based on previous rulings. It is how the court determines it today, not how it determined it 500 years ago. Section 11, Judicial Appointment. Judges of parish courts shall be selected through a national merit-based review process and confirmed by public oversight committees. Right? So, we don't have the judges of a court voting for another judge to be put on the payroll. It should not be like that. The public should always have a say in who is going in as a judge of a court. Judges of the courts of appeal and the Supreme Court shall be appointed through a national selection process involving professional qualification review. B, public transparency. C, confirmation by the Council of Parish Commanders. Exactly. Okay, I'm just setting up your friend. Exactly. Exactly. It's not who you know. It's who the public chooses. So if you notice here, it says nothing about a prerequisite of being a judge or an attorney. Now, that being said, it does not say it excludes those professionals, But it nowhere in here does it say to be a judge, you have to have practiced law for a period of time. You have to have done this. You have to have done that. Right? All of that would be a barrier to justice. Because now we are saying that if you are not educated enough, you cannot make a decision based on right or wrong. Right? Removing gatekeepers 101. Exactly. Now, if we put in place a system that says, listen, the only requirement is that you learn the Constitution and what the Constitution requires. Right? You study the Constitution, which is probably going to be less than 50 pages. And once you can pass a written exam on the Constitution, you are eligible to be a judge. Right? Yeah, man, teach the Constitution in schools. We have that earlier part of the education system. Right? The Constitution is an integral part of learning what your rights are and how the system works. So if we can have regular individuals in the courts serving as judges and juries and everybody keep moving around, you're not fixed and stationary in one place. So you cannot be a dictator in any case or fashion. And on top of that, you have to collaborate with the other judges and see the fairness of what's going on. Because guess what? If it is shown that you are constantly ruling a certain way and it is not based on the law or any proper reasoning, that is going to be grounds for removal. Right? That is a sign of corruption. We cannot have people just sitting there just because they have an educational component. You need to have morality as part of it, because it is typically the morality you are ruling on when you are sitting on a bench. It is not necessarily to say it is an action alone. You have to take other factors into consideration. So, we are going to remove that bar association barrier from the requirement of law. It is absolutely ridiculous, because at the same time, anyways, we're not going to get into those intricacies. So we cover the parish courts and we cover the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, right? So the judges of the Courts of Appeal and the Supreme Court shall be appointed through a national selection process involving professional qualification review, public transparency, confirmation by the Council of Parish Commanders, right? If you don't know what a parish commander is, you need to read above. You missed the last two classes. Section 12, removal of judges. Judges may be removed for A, corruption. Very simple. Very simple. You're taking bribes, or you're just ruling on your own whim. You're not taking the law into account. Corruption. Right? B, abuse of authority. If you are not ruling as the law says you're supposed to rule, or you're not ruling based on what the law prescribes, that is an abuse of your authority. You cannot allow that. So these are grounds. C, failure to uphold the Constitution. Very simple rules. We don't need 15 paragraphs saying if you do this, if you do that. It is just like a crime. If you commit a crime, you commit a crime. We don't need to be specifying, say, if you thief this way, or if you thief that way, or if you harm somebody this way, or harm. If you harm or you thief, you go to jail. It's that simple. Once you are convicted, straight to jail. We don't need these intricate definitions of what something is. We are not that foolish. If it say you're not supposed to do this, it don't matter how you do it. You're supposed to get punished. Once you violate the public, or once you endanger or violate somebody privately as well, outside of the constitutional allowance, right? 2, removal shall, let me see if I can bring this up so I can see it proper. Removal shall require a formal investigation. So obviously, we don't want somebody just making a complaint and you have removal proceedings, right? You're still gonna need a formal investigation. B, public disclosure of findings. And C, approval by the people through national vote. So, just like we would have in any proper investigation, right? You have a independent body. A body that is not a part of the government. This would be a separate investigatory agency that go out and conduct these investigations, right? And as long as the government cannot control any of the records, that is how we ensure fairness. Let me say that again. As long as the arm of government or the arms of government cannot control the public record, that is how we can ensure fairness. So if anybody can go and look and see what evidence is in a case, what evidence is submitted against a specific judge or a specific public official or whosoever, if we have that kind of transparency, ruling on it is very easy. Most people in society, I cannot say all, most people in society have a moral compass that can clearly see corruption and can clearly see unfairness. So once we can show the evidence that was gathered, it is not hard to see whether or not someone should be voted out and punished or if someone should remain in office, right? But again, we should always have a national vote. We should not have these private and secret administrative meetings and hearings outside of the public. The public should be in everything. Because a removal or the keeping of a public official is the public's business. So we should be an integral part of any kind of decision that affects the government or the public. Right? All right. Section 13, Article 2, Section 13. Speed of justice. Courts must resolve cases within reasonable time. And this is here because sometimes we cannot just specify to say this type of case must be resolved within 30 days or 60 days, right? It depends on the circumstance. But again, this can be expanded by looking at how current systems are working, right? So we can put conditions in here to say, for example, if evidence already submitted, cases should be started within 60 days, right? And here is another thing. Sometimes we have cases that are sitting in a court and the party who needs to serve someone else, they cannot find the individual or whatever other reason, they cannot serve the individual who they are trying to start a claim against, right? That should not be something in a court at that point then. If you can't find somebody, you cannot bring a claim. It's that simple. If you cannot describe the individual so they can be found, you cannot have a claim, right? You cannot have cases in a court where people cannot serve the individual whom they are bringing a claim against. Now you have 1,500 cases and you know, 300 of them, they cannot go anywhere. So they are sitting there because you don't have this or you don't have that. That needs to be removed. If you don't meet the requirements in the first place of evidence and finding the individual, you can't start a case, right? It should be that simple. 2, criminal trials shall begin within a defined period following accusation unless delay is requested by the accused, right? So if we define, for example, when criminal trials should begin, that comes from directly the Constitution. We don't leave that up to court rules and those kind of things and discretion of the judge. It has to be a formal process. if someone is requesting that the case be put off for a period of time, it has to be justified, right? On the record. 3, civil disputes shall be resolved promptly to prevent unnecessary hardship. The same thing. Once the case starts, you give people a time frame, a specific time frame, right? The case will start in 90 days. The case will start in 60 days. So now you have the chance to review the evidence. You have a chance to formulate your defense and so forth and so forth, right? A specific time frame so people don't have to come to court to ask the clerk, oh, which date the case are going to start? Which date are the first hearing? Which date are the pre-trial conference? Which date are this? Everything should be laid out. Plain and simple. Section 14. Equal access to justice. 1. Justice shall not be sold or purchased. Ah, gosh. This should be self-explanatory as part of corruption, right? But it has to be said. As they say, if it was not specifically prohibited, then we cannot call it a crime. We cannot call it something that was prohibited. So here you go. Justice shall not be bought or sold, shall not be sold or purchased. So you cannot pay someone to speed up your case. You cannot pay someone for a judgment. You cannot pay someone for nothing related to access to the law or justice. That's a crime. 2, courts shall not charge filing fees, hearing fees, or judgment fees. Sometimes I read some case and I see these words saying to be taxed or whatever, right? And the court is recouping a fee on almost every single case. It is... Anyways. Number 3. Court operations shall be funded entirely through public revenue. Very simple. Taxes. If we have control of our finances and we are funding, we are paying the individuals on a salary, it is simply a job. The court itself cannot be owned by a private individual. I will not say anything more on that. Section 15. Constitutional review. Any person may challenge a law or government action as unconstitutional. This is a basic right. If we feel that a law is unconstitutional or the action of a government agent is unconstitutional, you should simply be able to bring it to a court. And guess what? We should have a completely different court for this, right? So this is where you would bring it to the Supreme Court, which is where we put in Section 2. Such matters may be heard directly by the Supreme Court when necessary. Right? So if you feel like a law is unconstitutional, you bring it to the Supreme Court and you make your point. What right does it violate why you say the law is unconstitutional? Because the Supreme Court will have that kind of leverage to say, well, you know, we can see or we cannot see that this law is in violation of a certain right or a certain public duty, right? And then that can be put in place so that the next constitutional review for amendment can be voted on by the public. Because at the end of the day, the Supreme Court itself cannot change the law. It can only suggest that this appears to be in violation of something. So then the people would still have to vote on that. Right? The justice system of Section 16, duty of the justice system. The justice system of Jamaica exists to 1. Protect the rights of the people. That is paramount. 2. Resolve disputes peacefully. 3. Maintain order. And 4. Ensure accountability under the law. Right? So, and that is where we are with the constitutional draft. if we have a system that is, as Damien says, simple and clear, where it does not take a degree for you to understand or comprehend what is written. If we have a system that we can look at and say, okay, this is what it says, so this is what has to be done, right? And we don't have a mountain of paragraphs to go through. We don't have a mountain of bureaucracy or ambiguity. We don't have local discretion by a review institution. Then we eliminate a lot of problems. Because if the people already know that this is what the Constitution say, right? There is no room for interpretation of anything, really. The only thing the courts are really going to be doing at that point is applying the law to the case. Because they will not have access to common law. So now it only leaves the law and the case. Very simple. Right? So, for those who came in late, and you might be wondering, how do we get to this document? How do I get to a copy of this document to see, what is in it and what you are talking about and so forth? You go to voiceofjamaica.com. Let us go back to the home page. This is voiceofjamaica.com. You click on the first post which says New Constitution. And then you click on the post that says Constitution and Bill of Rights. So we have the text right here on the website, or you can click on the PDF edition on the top left of the page, right? And the PDF edition brings you here, where you can, review it on your phone. You can download a copy so that you can review it on your phone or your tablet or whatever it is, right? And you can go through the document on your device. Now, if you want to make a suggestion, to add something, to modify something, to include something, you can scroll down to the very end of this page, which we're going to move that to the top. You scroll down and you submit the information in this form. You name your email and you put your suggestion here. And once you submit it, it will get over to our side, and we will also post it on the site so that others can see what suggestions others have made. All right? And that is how we get to that. So this is a collaborative effort. What we are doing here is we are drafting the first constitution by the people, for the people. One voice. That is what we are doing here. Right? So, all right, so Michael want to come up. If you want to come up, you can click on the box and you can come up and voice your suggestions or voice your comments on the discussion, and we can exchange ideas and so forth. So, if we draft a constitution like this, and again, this is our first draft, right? The draft is not complete yet. We're only down to probably about a third of it. And the goal is to create a simple constitution that everyone can comprehend. Everyone can use. Everyone can see that they are being treated fairly. The law applies fairly. The courts apply fairly. The law enforcement is enforcing the law properly and fairly, and we will eliminate a lot of colonial problems that we still face today, right? And that is the point of this. If we as a people have never come together and voice how we feel about our government, or how we feel about how the system of justice should be instituted, then we are still under someone else's rule. We are still under colonial powers. So at the end of the day, we have to come together and draft our own constitution. We have to come together and put the laws in place that are fair and equal to all peoples of the island. Right? Right now, our current Constitution, Order in Council 1962. It does a lot of things, you know. It offers protection, right? But the problem is, it does not specify the law. It has removed much of the law, and because of the ambiguity, for example, we don't have anything having to do with, and actually it's not really ambiguous, you know. It's not really ambiguous, because if it doesn't say something, that means that it is not allowed. That is the basic tenet of law. If the Constitution don't say something, that means that the government is not allowed to do it, right? Or sometimes something is specifically restricted. However, because we have not defined the judicial functions and the judicial application as it relates to cases, the courts have what you call broad discretion. They are exercising power untethered, meaning sometimes the court is ruling on a matter and they have no basis on which they are ruling in law. What they are using is common law, which is basically court rulings from previous times. That's what they are using to say, well, they are going to rule this way or they are going to rule that way, which again it's unfair. It's unfair, and I'll say why. If we have a court that is going to use common law, right, instead of the Constitution, what that means is, as long as there is a court ruling in history that is of significance, right? Let's say from a Supreme Court or a High Court within the same, not even the same, really. Not even the same, because you can use what you call persuasive authority from different jurisdictions. If you can find a case, even from the 1600s, where there is no contradiction to that case, you can use that case today to supplement your claim, to use as persuasive authority. And that is not fair. That means that the actual body of law is from the is over 400 years ago worth of law or worth of common law. You would have to accept as the body of law, because if you're going to be able to use a case from that far away, where not only the system of justice but also the system of law, the system of society, the system of technology, everything was different, but yet still the ruling from that far away can be used as persuasive authority. That is unfair. That is absolutely unfair. That means that the law, the body of law itself, is 400 plus years worth of case rulings. How can that be any fair basis for someone to look at something and say, well, this is the law. This is how I'm going to rule on a case. It don't make sense. Don't make sense. So I am not a fan of common law. Obviously, that's what is at play now. Right? You have to basically learn from some of those rulings. But as far as current systems of law is concerned, that is something that we should abolish. We should have a static body of law, a simple body of law, that anybody who either come to Jamaica or is born in Jamaica, they can simply look at the Constitution and say, you know something? Okay, me know what this I say. Me understand this. This is written in modern law. You know, this is not something that I have to go and do 3 to 4 months worth of research to comprehend. And that is the barrier all around the world. The body of law is not in one place in many parts of the world. It is this big volume of information plus common law. It is ridiculous. Cannot have fairness. Cannot have justice. A matter of fact, I was doing some research. I cannot say the name of the place. I was doing some research and I was looking at the history of constitutional change. Right? Because I am wondering what actually changed from the early 1900s to now, why the court system is so dynamic. It is so it's just of such a changing nature that you have to wonder if this is how people have been living all this time. And so now I'm looking at the constitutional changes and I'm looking at the Constitutional Review Committee notes. And it is really the attorneys and the judges who put these technicalities in place to allow their own flexibility. What do I mean by that? The lawyers, their association, which is the Bar Association, the judges, which is the judicial councils, and members of the political parties, what they realize is that people don't care about how the courts are run. People care about fairness. People care about how the law applies to them. People care about those intrinsic matters. People don't care about court administration. And that is how they were able to modify the Constitution, even though they had a general consensus vote from the public to make the constitutional amendments. People were not focused on those technical details that they were trying to introduce. So now those technical details are what transitioned over into allowing the courts to be making all of these decisions. So now the courts have not only the latitude of shifting around judges and creating arbitrary courts, the judges can now rule with discretion. Absolute discretion in many cases. If you don't confine their authority, which is not an easy thing to do in some cases, the judges can rule with discretion in most cases, especially family law cases. It is absolutely ridiculous. And not only that, the courts, some of them set up nowadays that you have constitutional offices, right? Where someone has to be either appointed or they have to have gubernatorial assignment, which is basically the governor is putting them into power, putting them in place. Now what they do is they create something in statute. So instead of you having the Constitution define what the courts are doing or what these individuals are supposed to do as a job, you still have that level, you know. But now that court or that individual with that office, because every public officer is in office. That is what it's called when you're doing public duty. You're in public office. So now that individual can now create a third tier class where they can now delegate authority. So yes, you have the individuals still at the constitutional level, but now under them, they can now delegate tasks and delegate other individuals to do things who are not constitutionally appointed. So now they are calling that administrative duties, right? So let me break down what that means and an example of that. So now you can have a judge of, let's say the parish court. This might not be at play in Jamaica, right? But you can have a judge of let's say the parish court, right? And that judge can now say, okay, since we have, let's say, 2 parish courts, just using an example, right? Let's say we have 2 parish courts. Now, what we can do is we can say, okay, we need 15 judges, right? 7 over Yaso and 8 over Yaso. So because we need 15 judges, we now go ask the governor to assign 15 judges. What we're going to do, we're going to create a judicial, internal statutory judicial authority so that we can assign the judges. Because we already meet the constitutional threshold of having one judge or however amount of judge per court. But now we want to extend our authority under that. So now we are creating our own quasi-judicial branch under our constitutional authority. Does the Constitution allow that? No. But does the people know that's happening? No. That is a fundamental problem. So that is why we have to, even though it is not allowed, because the Constitution never said that is what is supposed to happen. But the Constitution also did not say it should not. So by nature, we need a clause in every Constitution to say, if the Constitution does not authorize it, it is specifically and strictly unlawful. Because otherwise, this is what many judges are using to say, well, the Constitution never said you're not supposed to do this, so they are not breaking the Constitution. That is wrong. Because the Constitution is telling you what you are allowed to do, so anything it don't say you're supposed to do, obviously, and I have to say obviously, because you cannot infer anything else. If it was wide open to interpretation where it was just telling you what not to do, then that would be a different story. But the Constitution is specifically limiting power. So you cannot say just because it never said this, that means that it is discretionary. It is foolishness. So now we have to define these things so we don't have these little loopholes they can jump and hoop and mismatch and do all kind of foolishness. Which we just say anything the Constitution doesn't say, it is unlawful. So you have no discretion, no power to create underneath the rug. Right? When you give the power to the people, they give the power to the people that represent them. Sir, I'm not sure if it's a sir or if you're a madam, but you see, when you are late to a discussion, you are often probably going to make erroneous comments, because I am pretty sure, based on the comment that you made, that you have no idea what we're talking about. Absolutely none. You just join. You must just reach, because your comment doesn't make any sense to what we are discussing. Okay? So anyways, if we allow these kinds of interpretations of the Constitution, right, where we don't limit the creation of offices, if we don't limit what can be done, and if we don't set strict boundaries, this is what happens over time, right? We cannot allow technicalities to shift the power structure from the Constitution to local rules, right? We know that sometimes we might have to define, court rules, like for instance, the way people are attired, the process to get into a court. We might need to say, yes, we still need metal detectors at the doors, right? That no need for the Constitution. That is a building rule, right? That is a court rule. So court rules should not have anything to do with actual deliberation of a matter. It shouldn't have anything to do with duties per se. It should only have things to do with infrastructure or a process that is not connected to court cases or, judicial discretion and so forth. Inspector says, but the essence of your discourse is preventing overreach by the government. Am I correct? No, you are not correct. You are not correct. We have just gone through a voluminous body of work, and you are catching the tail end of it. So you are not correct. We are giving examples of what is happening, and we are also going through theoretical scenarios we are at. So again, it requires context. I get what you're saying, you know. If we were talking about the current system of government and how we would go about changing it, right? I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, what we are discussing is far beyond that scope, right? We were simply using that as a reference. So, anyways, at the end of the day, we have to take these considerations. We have to learn from these lessons so that we don't repeat them in the future. So we don't create things in an isolated bubble to say, yeah man, this sound good, that sound good, we should have this right, we should expressly state that everybody have this and that and that. Yes, we can, but we have to see what is happening in other jurisdictions and in other places so that we don't make the same mistake of we create something and then we fall victim and trap to what was already overcome in other places, or the mistakes we see in other places, we end up making those same mistakes again, right? So we have to look at different areas before we actually put certain things in place, right? So again, we were talking about constitutional drafting and what we should be considering as a people if we are to draft a new constitution. Free from colonial influence or power, it would strictly be a constitution of the people, for the people, so that we limit what powers we give up as a people and what powers we keep. Because it is absolutely absurd that we have a voting system that is just binary. We vote and we give up power. That's it. There is no alternative, right? If you don't vote, the very few that vote is going to still be considered a national consensus, even though we don't have a 50% vote, which again is another atrocious thing, because the Constitution does not define what the majority is. It just simply states that political power is conferred by national vote. So even if 300,000 people vote out of 3 million, it is still considered a national vote, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? But that is the time we live in today. But we have a chance to create our own, right? And if we input and we come together as one people and we make our suggestions and we draft the constitution and we review it together, we input our submissions and everything necessary, by the time we are done, again, we can limit and exactly, we can limit and somewhat bulletproof a constitution by stating specifics that are concrete within the constitution, so that no power can be exercised outside of it, by simply stating anything within the constitution is mandatory, and anything that is not specifically stated by the constitution is prohibited, right? And that way we keep out any kind of arbitrary power grab that may result from someone trying to use their brain on the constitution itself. I saw some people wanted to come up, but I don't know if that was a fat finger. So, that being said, the constitutional draft is still on voiceofjamaica.com. Let us go back there. So if we go to voiceofjamaica.com, scroll down, and it is the first post, which is new constitution. Hey Roberta, welcome. Lawful, welcome to the live. we click on New Constitution, we scroll down, we click on Constitution and Bill of Rights, and there we will have the constitutional draft. If you'd like to view the PDF version, it's right there on the top left. If you want the Word version to play around with it, you have the Word version there as well, which is called draft document. So the PDF edition would probably work better on the phone because you can zoom in better and you can navigate better from the PDF edition. And this is the current draft that we have. We're going to be continuing over the next possibly 2 weeks, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, until we have completed it, and then we're going to start adding some additions. We're going to allow for additions and suggestions by we the people who may want to extend or modify some of the provisions that are listed in here, right? So once we have it completed, then we move on to step 2. Zin? So next time we are going to have another section to review, another section to add, so that we can move forward with a more comprehensive review of Article 3. So we're at Article 2, which we just discussed, which is the system of law and justice, and it deals with the courts, legal process, and access to justice. All right, and we are currently at 18 pages within this document, and we will continue until we have the entire sections. Right. Once we are done, we're going to have a table of contents at the very top, so that we can easily determine, which section is at what page, etc., etc. Right?
Good day, good day.
Good day, Mr. Spectre. Lawful, welcome.
Or Bramford. Yeah, man. Just to address the person in the comments. What did I say? That respond to my comment, right? You can't escape that, regardless of how you do it. If as stringent as you want to be, it'll go allow for the people who are inclined to use them brain, as you say, to use them brain to find ways of manipulate the system, and that manipulation would be left to the interpretation of the persons that are adversely affected by it. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree to a degree.
Yeah, so I mean, really and truly, I get what you're saying, my boss. The laws and the structure of the nation must be in such a way that it satisfies the needs of the general populace, right? However, if the general populace lack common sense, for lack of a better word, them always will feel victimized. Not because you are an entrepreneur and you see where you can make money from this and that and the third, but because them refuse to use for them agency to create these conditions for themselves.
Right. There's always going to be a disparity, right? There's going to be a set of people who want to know, they want to be informed, and there's going to be a set of people who say, well, if it don't affect me right now, well, I'm in a business, right? You can't stop that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the point of any legal system is to prevent the abusers. It is not really the ones that want to really care. So we can't, and just like, interacting with people, so some people you can't please them no matter what you do.
True.
Right? But at the end of the day, the point of the law is to stop abuse. It is not necessarily to stop people from or to limit the freedom of people. But in some cases, freedom has to be limited in some cases, in order to create a balance. Because the world in and of itself is imbalance. You
Well,
know,
yeah.
so some people have a craft, some people have a specialty, some people, brain work different in a certain way. Some people brain work faster than others. So we know that there's always going to be a compromise when it comes to the law. But generally speaking, if we set up something where we say, okay, as long as you're not harming someone, right?
Yeah.
You're generally free to do what you please. You're not harm someone, you're not steal someone's things, you're not cause public havoc. Those are the basic tenets of a law,
True. Yeah,
right?
but I'm
So
gonna give you an example. I'm gonna give you an example though.
yeah.
Take for instance the usage of road traffic, all right?
Hmm.
Um, the law it in all fairness, you would have said that certain things that was put in law, right? Like the use of the road, we give respect to like the warden and the police and other people will get assigned by the government to do them things, them tasks, right? Plus the usage of the signage on the road, right? Like the red light and the green light and the markings on the road, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't directly adversely affect any users of the road, don't it?
Wait,
You know,
what are
yeah.
we're talking about all of those you just described?
Yeah. Just in a nutshell, you don't say fear. You go the same for the politician, you go the same for the common man. All of us are supposed to use the road in the same way because the law dictates how you use the road, right?
I wouldn't agree.
Okay. I understand. You might have points where you disagree with it. But alright, go say the street light, the street light, the traffic lights. Fair
Mhm.
enough. It goes straight across the board for everybody, right?
Right.
But there's still a need for um police officers to be on the road regulating the traffic. That become a problem because of the people that these things were meant to protect. Now it causes the police to go up on the road and give them the ability now to abuse the said people that the laws were made to protect by doing what? By abusing the additional powers given to them by the said people who refuse to follow the said laws.
Well, I don't believe that to be true.
Okay, I'm listening.
So if we look at the history of the Road Traffic Act, and first and foremost, the Road Traffic Act is in violation of the Constitution because
Okay.
it is not an inherent law. It is an extension of a law or something that is being purported as law, which is the Constabulary Force Act. Would you agree?
Sure. Yeah. One of them go hand in hand.
Right.
Bench
So,
and what we say.
the Constabulary Force Act creates the police force. It gives the police their first power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, the Constabulary Force Act specifically only gives the police the power to regulate congestion where there is traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It specifically defined that already. Now the Road Traffic Act comes along and now arbitrarily creates so-called violations to say if you don't do this, the police now has the power to do this. Why I say arbitrary? Because the Constabulary Force Act already creates the power of the police. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have something created from a different law, you
Mm-hmm.
cannot extend a power that was not created initially with that office.
So I follow you up to that point and I don't disagree with you. So as a solution, you don't be a part of the government now, either the judiciary, the legislature, or the executive. How would you know as a servant of the public fix that problem without without creating arbitrary laws or rules.
Well, this is where the conversation goes. What
Mhm.
problem were we looking to solve by the creation of the Road Traffic Act and the regulations?
Okay, I'm following you. Is that a question or you're
Yeah,
making a point?
yeah, that's a question for you.
Well, to be honest, me no have all the knowledge, so if you can impart some of yours, me open to listen to what you say so the conversation can continue.
Right. So the reason I bring up that question is because a lot of the records that would show what happened over time,
Mm-hmm.
like we don't have, and maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. The public does not have open access to the records of Parliament. Much of the
Okay.
records that we see and hear are so-called gazetted records, which some of these documents that are floating around does not even have the Governor General's signature on there to assent it into law and publish it in the Gazette.
So,
We only see copies of documents floating around saying it is the law, but we don't see the lawful process it has gone through to be published as something being in force and effect as a law.
okay.
So
Yeah,
now,
I'm following.
yeah, so now we can only infer that the point of the Road Traffic Act apparently, because we don't have the facts to support the reason for Parliament to have instituted these things in the first place. But I will also get to other factual bases that we have access to. Number one, we hear about crime and violence. We hear about drugs. We hear about all these other factors within society that the constabulary force, the commissioner, and those in parliament are saying that the Road Traffic Act and regulations is there to reduce crime and to prevent crime, right? We heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
But the Constabulary Force Act, where the power is coming from to the police, does not give those powers. The Constabulary Force Act specifically says the police can detect crime. So the crime has to exist in the first place before you can go and find out about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this goes to other jurisdictions as well. If you try to prevent crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what allows the police now, under presumption of law, to stop any and everybody because they are presuming they are preventing crime. They're stopping it before it starts.
Mm-hmm.
But crime is not something that is just defined. It's not something,
It have
I
to
guess you can
occur
say.
before it becomes the thing.
It has to go in front of the court.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the police say, well, you were, let's say you break the stoplight, so that is a crime or that is an offense.
Yeah.
All they can do is accuse you. You have to still go through the court process, and the judge has to make the determination whether or not you broke the law.
True.
So
Then that is the
no,
purpose of the judiciary, correct?
well, partly
Yeah,
apart,
because
because the way it is operating now, it is mostly operating on common law. It is not operating on the constitution or the actual laws.
true.
They're only using the law when it appears to benefit the government.
True. But
Because
go ahead.
the reason I say that is because when a police officer make an accusation in the form of a ticket or an information sheet, they don't go
Mm-hmm.
through due process. They tell you can pay or you can go to court. When you go to court, what do? They start the criminal process. Your first appearance is just like a criminal appearance. It is arraignment. Are you guilty or not guilty? And then they start the criminal process. There is no submission of evidence to support the charge in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, and that in itself is wrong when you think about it on a deep
Right.
level. Mm-hmm.
So
But go ahead.
that is why I say I don't necessarily agree that some of these things that are being enforced as law are actually laws.
Yeah, and I can agree with you to that point. But it bring me back to the point that I made earlier when I entered the room. Um, what really happens most, if not all the time, even now, is that the people are not willing to take responsibility for their own actions, and therefore they throw off, if not most of the responsibility on people who have their own interests at heart. And then when the problems are created, we complain about the problems that we basically create on ourselves.
So give me an example when you say the people are not willing to take responsibility.
All right, let me use one for example. Use the internet. Maybe not so much in Jamaica, but it is being instituted now, right? Where
Mhm.
would you agree that even though I'm looking at your image that represents you, it might not actually be the person that I'm speaking to, correct?
Correct.
Good. And if you send a message via WhatsApp, anybody can take my phone or your phone and send a message, correct?
Correct.
Good. So we need to create a distinction between reality and cyberspace. And the distinction should be that outside of things that are heavily regulated or protected, right? You can't really take nothing we come on the internet serious, correct?
Right. Well,
Good.
you
But
should
they are
not.
still,
Correct.
yeah. But you still have laws now. The government has the power now, based on the people, to pass laws that protect people on the internet, something that should not be taken seriously. And people are getting jail time and paying fines and losing their livelihood, or because individuals can't come to terms with the fact that if I am behind a screen using text to send a message that is publicly disseminated or whatever the word might be. My English not so good on Saturdays. Saying? And they want the government now to protect them to say, I am unable to say, okay, said it me can't take this serious. Somebody need to pay for it on the next side. You follow me? I say, no, it affects all of us because you can accidentally or freely say anything because the law now dictates that you have lost points off of your power of free speech over a
Right.
joke, which is the internet.
Right. Well, so I have, I guess, a mixed response to that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we will have the complaints coming to the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem I have with this current system is that nothing is transparent. So if somebody makes a complaint, or we have 5 people that make a complaint, we cannot make a law based on the consensus of 5 people. But that may very well be the case.
True.
So, but we also have to consider other spectrums, which again, we already have laws to protect people. And this is another thing we covered earlier, where I'm saying we don't need 4, 5, and 6 different laws saying that these are crimes, right? We don't need, if we have the Constabulary Force Act, we already say, certain things is a crime and this is what the police can go and do and whatever. We don't need Road Traffic Act, we don't need Road Traffic Regulation, we don't need the Dangerous Drugs Act, we don't need, all of these extra things I give we 500 more pages to go read is unnecessary. So, for example, if someone is using a phone or a computer or an internet-enabled device to cause harm in some way, once it is a harm that is done, it should be adjudicated that way. We don't need a law to say, well, if you send this text message or if you send, that is foolishness. It has to fall within the gamut of the law, right?
True.
But to restrict everybody just because 5 or even to say 15 people have a negative experience, I don't believe that we should be making laws based on those things unless it really affects the majority.
Okay, so may I ask, may I introduce our name now, right?
Mm-hmm. Still there?
Because as I said, I have all of the information, so you might can help me out with this. Made because um, if a law is created, right, that
Mm-hmm.
excludes a specific body of people, or excludes or is what prejudice against a specific group of people, would that law be would it have weight, or would it be met with opposition from the people? I'm talking under the constitution now.
Well, initially, this is why it is open for suggestions, right? And debate and additions. It has to be a balance. It is based on majority vote.
Yeah, so if the majority decides that because you are of the skin tone that you are of, right? You
Mhm.
should be quote unquote victimized. That would be unlawful or unconstitutional, don't it? You see
Well, yes, I agree.
where I go with this?
But
Because you can't exclude one, you must include all. And,
right, but what I am again,
Mhm.
your point is very valid because at the end of the day, you can have the majority voting on something that a small group would say, well, me not agree with that, right? But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
the I don't think because just like well, me not gonna say just like because really and truly we have not truly have we have not had any transparency in anything at all over the past 50 years when it comes to government. Everything has been behind closed doors, including voting. So what we hear and what we see, even in financial matters, we're getting reports, we're getting summaries, we're getting people explaining things. We have not had access to raw data. None of it. So really and truly, unless we have a platform where we have direct voting, independent of the government and isolated, where it is immediately tallied up at the end of the day, like it is on a live screen, right? As people go vote, so we see the voting right away. Unless we have something like that, I don't think we have truly seen any true impartial voting or real live fair voting system in my generation.
Yeah, true that, true that.
So I really couldn't
Yeah,
agree with, to say the public this or the public that are majority this or majority that, because really and truly, we really don't know if the numbers that we are seeing are real.
yeah, almost impossible to know.
So that's why I
Because
say we need to have our own voting system.
anywhere power exists, the potential for corruption also exists.
Right. So for something like this, this is why I say we come together and we create and we make suggestions and things like that. Because if we try to modify what is already there, not only do we have to go through the colonial process, we would still be in the dark with everything.
Yeah, I can agree with you.
Right. So that's what we're discussing on this side. As it concerns a constitution, fairness, and things like that. Because the only way we can know is if we control it as a people. If we leave a few to control any kind of record or any kind of decision making that affects the majority, we are going to suffer.
Yeah, somebody will, not we, but somebody will.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true, because not everybody is going to
But
suffer.
a lot of people, as I said, Yeah. You rightfully say it. You always a go have imbalance. That's another something I think I feel like the Bible is right and it said judgment is mine, say the Lord, you know. And I think we have the capability there to find true balance in anything at all.
Right.
Man. But yo, respect for your time, you know, my father. I go and listen and see you, man. Is it?
Yeah, man, big up yourself, same way. Thanks for coming up. Yeah, so, that was a good little reasoning. And these are the conversations we're going to be having in the future regarding how we take control and how we take responsibility. Because right now, I don't think that people don't want to take responsibility. I think it is a matter of fact that we don't have the chance to take responsibility. And with all of the resources around us, there is no reason to not have the public involved in not only lawmaking, but in societal decisions, in projects that needs to happen, in focusing on the island, focusing on the people, focusing on the wood, the water, and the produce. I mean, to to how resourceful Jamaica is, and to look at the condition of our institutions that the public has to engage with. It is embarrassing. It is really embarrassing. The price of things are ridiculous. We are being charged commercially for everything. Whether you are an individual trying to buy some food to go home, or you are a business trying to make a profit, you are being charged out of your nose. See? If we don't come together and create our own system of laws, our own system of how we want our country to run, we're going to continually be dictated to. That is a fact. We can look at our history and see that. We don't need somebody else to tell we. We born can see this. Right? There are some people who are still alive that were around when the Constitution was first introduced, the current one. Right? The Jamaica Order in Council 1962. And it was not the people who put this together, it was political and legal professionals. It was political and legal professionals who put the Constitution in place. And it was a constitutional framework because it was the very first since the alleged Declaration of Independence. And since then, we have not ourselves come together and create our constitution based on the framework. Exactly. That is why it is still in brackets. Because it is only a reference. So the colonial power will continue until we have created our own constitution. We need to create our Bill of Rights. We need to create our declaration. We need to create our constitutional body of laws. Did you know that almost all of the great nations that became a nation, they did the exact same thing? They had to disclaim any kind of colonial power. They had to create their own system of government. They had to create their own laws, rules, and regulations and protection for rights. And then they built from that. Everything is not going to be done in a day. But you have to start at some foundation. And the foundation has to be strong. Foundation has to be strong. So that is why We have to look at other jurisdictions. We have to look at other documents. We have to look at what other countries have done before. And once we create our own living constitution by the people and for the people, and only the people having the power to authorize the changes in the constitution, that is the only way to maintain integrity and keep the power within the hands of the people. Of course, there are other measures to take as we go along, right? We still need rules within society, basic rules, right? But the law itself should be within the Constitution. When the law is removed from the Constitution and placed in the hands of a parliament or a house or a senate or any of those legislative bodies, corruption begins. Corruption begins. They are no longer answerable to the people. They now call it separation of powers. A separation of powers is simply having a house and having different rooms in the house. That is not separation of powers. If you don't have someone who is managing the house, it is not a separation of powers, because they still can walk from one room to the next and go talk to each other and plan and do what they feel. A department within the government is not a separation of powers. The only separation of power we can have is where the people is the ultimate authority and the people can create their own separate, private oversight body. If the people are not able to oversee the operations of government, that's when they say hell and powder was come. So at the end of the day, we cannot be lazy about it. We cannot pass on responsibility. We cannot put things aside for later. We have to make definite declarations within the Constitution itself. So that way, nobody can wiggle from left to right. And that is what we have begun to do, right? We have to protect our land. You know, even today, you know, if you talk to people and they say, who own a piece of land over there, so? You hear people say, you know, see a crown land? You know, see a crown property? And it now clicking at people's head, you know. If a crown land and crown property, that means that the crown own it. So if the crown own it, how did the crown come to own it? And if the crown own it, then how comes the crown government dissolve before every other election? You have to really think about these things. But if you don't have intelligent conversations between people who are not trying to argue, you're not trying to say a me right or a me wrong. You're trying to build communication. You're trying to build intellect. You're trying to build collective awareness, right? That's different from saying, yo, me not like how this around, me not like how. Get that out of your head. Get away from that. Understand what is really happening and then what it should be. That is where we start. We can't start from argument perspective of, you know, like this and you know, like that, and this supposed to go on and them do this and them. Like, that are just argument. Discussions are solution oriented. That is the point of a discussion. You come to a solution to a issue, come to a solution to a problem. If you can't come to a solution to an issue or a problem, then all you're doing is arguing. You're just trying to see who is right and who is wrong. And if that is the case, then you're not going to reach anywhere. You just have the conversation, you cuss and you go on, or you raise your voice and you shout and you this and you that, and you gain nothing in the end. What's the point of that? So, AI is summarizing saying that we're trying to rewrite the Jamaica Constitution. No, we are not. We are not trying to rewrite the Jamaica Constitution. We are creating the first. We are creating the first constitution by the people. Jamaica, that we know, is a brand. I have shown this before. I am not going to be going down that road because it's not going to help you. Even if you can see that Jamaica is not on a map, Jamaica is not what we think it is. It's not going to help you. Right? Later on, we can discuss how to handle those situations. But as it stands right now, it doesn't make any sense to go down the road of talking about what Jamaica is. Because it's not going to help you in the long run or in the short run, for that matter. Right now, we should just be focused on how we as a people can take back our power, take back our lands, take back our property, take back our power so that we can stop suffering. Imagine we are here trying to make a basic living, and even the little money where you have, you try to buy something from overseas. You buy the thing and it reach Jamaica. And when it reach Jamaica, you sometimes you have to pay double. You have to pay again what you paid for the item. When they're done, tax you with fees, tax you with duties, tax you with tax. That is not supposed to exist for the natives. What sense does it make that we put the government in power and the government is taxing us? Oh, we have to pay child support? Is that what it is? I don't know. Are we paying for putting them in power? What is it? Because I thought our tax dollars were supposed to cover that. Right? The only thing they're supposed to be charging for is trade and commerce. That is what they are even advertising on the customs website. They are there to facilitate efficient trade. Exactly, parent support. It is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. How many times are we going to pay? We are pay when time we work. We are pay. No, we are pay when time we work and get money from our labor. We are pay when time we go buy food. We are pay when time we go buy gas. We are pay when time we go buy anything. We are pay. When do we stop paying? When? If we are going to be a nation of people who are going to be not only content, but we're going to be efficient, we're going to be loving, we're going to be caring about each other, we're going to eliminate crime and violence. Hey, you see when time the party come around? How we define not only the reduction, but the elimination of crime and violence, that is going to be an interesting topic. It's going to be very interesting. But I'll give you a sneak preview. The prison system needs to be eliminated. We cannot have a prison system in a country that we are trying to build as a nation. Not only are we helping to create corruption by having a prison system, we do not gain anything from it. And if we are gaining something from locking up people, then there is something wrong with that mentality. If somebody does something that is not detrimental, right? If somebody does something that is not costing the life of someone else, then it is better to have that individual work off their crimes in society, right? Make them work for free. The only thing they get is housing and food. That's it, right? They have to work off their time. Then that is how we build a productive society. Right? Exactly, that is how it used to be. And that is how the ancient African culture, and I say African because it was all across the African continent. There were no prisons. But the people decided what your punishment is. Sometimes, if you're thief enough, they will chop off your hand. That is the only way to stop you. If you thief again, the next hand gone. Right? There are certain things that were, yes, people today would call them, boy, this is inhumane, that is. But, I bet you won't do it again. It's not like, no say it can't happen, because all of the punishment is outlined. But if you still decide to go out there and go take people things, thief people, go thief people, hug on them something there, you don't need a hand there. At least you get an awful warning. If you don't learn, the second one gone. So now somebody have to go feed you. You can't even wash you. But at the end of the day, that is better than having somebody sit in a prison. That is better than have more corruption go on with Saddamism and all of them something there. It is way better for somebody to work off their corporal punishment in society, working to rebuild society, like the roads and clean up the place, and even sometimes working in a certain areas, right? Than to have them to walk around, right? Than to have them sit down in a one place in a dirty and inhumane conditions and those kind of that is way better. All right, look on this, right? Imagine we have all of these potholes over the island, and it is claimed that over $2 billion per year is spent, fixing the roads, maintaining the roads, and call it maintaining the roads. Instead of pay all of that money, when people can't hear and they might get them sentenced, that is a part of them job. They have to go up on the truck and help fix the road them, right? Help with road maintenance. Help with cleaning up some of the road. Some of the road them, the actual asphalt is bush up along the road. Every single day you carry them out and them have to go use or machete or want something and help clear the roads and things. That is way better than having them sit in a prison and do all kind of foolishness. Work for your food. Work for your food. If you don't work, you don't eat. That's simple. Unless you are, have a medical condition or something. Right? And that is how we can turn our society around. We can... You get the drift. You get the drift. So, until we as a people start determining these things, determining the punishment, determining how our island is run, we will always have these problems. Always have these problems. So we have to take things into our hands. We have to take responsibility. We have to, as a nation, say this is fair, this is what we want. We have to have accountability and transparency. One of the biggest things in this day and age is transparency. Almost, I'm saying almost, because in other places you can request documentation of things, but that is still not enough. I don't think anything should be secret when it comes to government finance. What does it matter? If I know, let's say say Jamaica has $500 trillion. How does that make a difference for me? How does that make a difference for anybody? Can we thief it once everybody know? No. No, you cannot. Because accountability now becomes a thing. If we know this is what is there, the only people that can benefit is if somebody don't know, right? They can figure out a way to siphon it out. If we have transparency as it relates to contracts, right? Let's say no contract can be signed without the people knowing what it is, what's in there, and whether or not we want it to be done, right? What if we now know everybody who own any company, any corporation doing business with the government? That changes the ball game significantly. That changes the ball game significantly. Because now we will see who is benefiting from contracts. If you are doing business with the government, the company has to be registered, and the information has to be publicly known. I should not need to go request information to see anything. It don't make sense. Why not just make it public? I am not asking you to change any records. I just want to see. Why do I have to ask you to see what is supposed to be taxpayers' records? It no comprehend, it no compute, it no calculate. See it? We don't even need blockchain technology. Alright, just because them did a report the live earlier, I'm going to share something with you. Blockchain technology is interesting. You see, when it first came out, you see, I love hear them last part of the live there, you know. When Bitcoin was first developed and released to the public, it was claimed that it was developed by a single individual. That was definitely a lie. And you will see that in the coming years when they release certain information. Right? Anyways, I was looking at the technology at the early stages. Right? And I looked at it and I say, something is wrong here. Because I know how technology works. You have a server and you have clients. For example, you have the phone company and you have a bunch of people connecting to the one phone company, don't? It's the same way all technology works. You have a server and you have client devices, right? So my question is, if Bitcoin and any other cryptocurrency or blockchain technology is out there, why are people thinking that it is just the people who are creating or keeping the network up that actually has access to the network? Like, I was confused because I'm saying, I know people are not technologically inclined, right? But I'm saying, why are they promoting it as a decentralized system? There is no such thing. When we have technology, right? Either it is isolated or it is connected by a server. A server can be a network server. A server can be an application server. A server can be a services server. But there is always something in the middle, and clients connect to it all around like tentacles, right? Like a tree. A tree is not a tree without branches. Literally. The brain is not a brain without neurons. So it is the same thing with the concept of a computer and blockchain technology. It is not decentralized, and it never was, it never will be. The difference is who is controlling it, and can it be controlled with laws? That is the only difference in technology. So because of the names and because of the nature of certain things, laws may be created to oversee the operation of that thing. Right? Now, that being said, I am going to tell you the true nature of blockchain technology such as Bitcoin, Litecoin, and all these different things. In classical computing, we have a server, and then we have a client. Then we have 2 clients, we have 3 clients, 5 clients connecting to the one server, right? And when they connect to the server, when the clients connect to the server, they get access to certain things, right? So you would get, for example, if you're using WhatsApp, you are connected to the server, and then you can send messages to someone else on the other side, right? You can send pictures, you can send videos, but you are not sending from person to person. That's not what's happening. It has to pass through a server in order for that service to work. right? So you never have direct connection from one device to the next. There is always something in the middle of those two devices. Always. If it connects to the internet, it is always passing through some server or some network. That being said, what was really being tested with Bitcoin was what is called remote processing. You may not be familiar with that term, but what this does is, or you can call it offload processing, right? Offload processing is what happens when instead of the server being so, I guess you can say, work intensive, right? You need a powerful server in order for so many devices to be connecting to it at a time. It's just like a router at home. If you have more than 20 or in today's age 50 devices connecting to it, it will now stop all other connections because it has reached its limit. The same thing with a server. You can only have so many devices connecting to it until it reaches its limit and it stops allowing connections in. That is what is called a DDoS attack, right? Too many connections to the server at the same time. So what they did with Bitcoin was they removed the server processing and placed it on the client devices. So even though you are still connecting to the server is no longer processing things. They move the processing back to your device. All the devices on the network are now the processing servers. All the server is doing is facilitating the connection. Everybody still connects to it, but the server does not do any processing anymore. Your device, your phone, your computer, all of those things, you are now the processor. Your power bill now goes up. This is why, if you follow technology news, this is why all of these companies are now going remote. They no longer need the data centers. They are now getting rid of all the servers. They are getting rid of all the networking equipment. They are getting rid of all of the colos. The only people or the only companies who are now still keeping servers are the ones who are doing web hosting. And the ones who are required to keep their own private data, like hospitals or financial institutions or some government agencies. But most of the other companies, what do? They rent their server space from Amazon. They rent their server space from Microsoft. They rent their services. All of it is now a platform as a service, PaaS. Platform as a service. And then they do, application as a service and all these different things. So now, the big corporate giants have moved all of their processing down to the client level. So now all they do is manage the network and they copy your data. That's all they do. Manage the network, copy your data. So that was what blockchain technology was intended to do, and that's what it continues to do. Why? All they have to do is reward you a small amount of the profits, right? And now your device now becomes a server that would be costing them hundreds of dollars. Now they just pay you $10, right? Now they just pay you $20. So now they can now recoup more of the profits. And now, and this is why all the technology keep on getting more powerful, because it don't make any other sense. Why do you need a phone that can operate as a computer or a projector? It don't make sense. But it only makes sense if your phone or your computer now becomes the server. It now becomes the processor. Now it becomes, and this is why they have all these laws to say that if you, for example, if you jailbreak your phone or you jailbreak, your other devices, you no longer have warranty, you don't no longer have this and that and whatever. Because they realize that if you ever know exactly what is being transmitted to and from your phone, you would not allow it. This is why they loosen the surveillance laws. This is why they loosen the laws related to whether or not you can sue a company for extracting your data. because you no longer, even though you own the physical device, you do not own access to the services. That is what that fight was all about. That is what his name? The Apple CEO would pass. That is why he said what he said before he passed away. He says your privacy is more important than the data that you're transmitting. Yeah, they try to do that with printer, but the problem with printer is you cannot have print data going over a secure network, so that failed. So they're not bother with that, right? So that is why Steve Jobs, that is what he was talking about when he was saying that your privacy is important, you know, and you shouldn't let the government do this and that, whatever. He could not say all of what he wanted to say because you still wouldn't understand. You still would not understand on a large scale. So your phone is now a server. This is why you have all of these viruses trying to hack into phones, because of the data that it's processing and storing. I can't get into all of that, you know, showing you some of those things that are happening, but you can, you know, if you have, I guess you can say, if you have the competence, you can look at your network data, what is actually being transmitted out, and you will see much of what I am saying, right? Yeah, and this is why public notices are important. So when people look at my page and they see the public notice and they say, what is this, and what do you mean by this? And I'll give you an example. If you go to the search bar when this live is over and you go to the search bar and try to search 876LB and see if you see anybody reposting any of my videos, you won't. It doesn't matter what I say, nobody's going to repost it. Why? Because they understand the nature of a public notice. They understand the nature of, if you violate, you can never win. Okay? So, anyways, that is all we have today regarding our constitutional draft. Again, I am going to update the submission form so that if you want to make a submission, it's going to be a little bit easier. Matter of fact, I'm going to put it on the post page so that way you can just submit it from the post page. Right. Well, we're not going to be going into cybersecurity anymore because that is too much for most people's brains. But that's just the basic rundown of how that works. Let's put this form right under the constitutional draft. Oh crap. No, say. Alright, so this is the code. Let's go back. Alright, so come on. Alright, so now no, I don't think anything would change with just the public notices. But once you take action with it, things definitely would change. Definitely. So it all depends on how you use it, not just the fact that it exists. Right? Okay, so just do constitutional suggestions. So I'm updating the post page so that we have. All right. So here we have. So let's go back to voiceofjamaica.com. Right. You scroll down and there's the new constitution. Click on that post. And here we have on the post page, you can make your constitutional draft suggestions so that this is easier to get to than when you go on the page, right? So you can make your suggestions right here and they will be posted on the site so that when we begin to make changes to the constitution, we can easily reference the suggestions that were actually made by. Matter of fact, I'm going to move all the suggestions over to this page so that we have a central place to look and have the Constitution and Bill and Rights just over here, right? So that is that. If you want a PDF version is right here as well, and you can go from there. All right, so that is all we have today. Again, if you have suggestions, voiceofjamaica.com, click on the new constitution post and you can make your suggestion there, or you can view the constitutional draft and we will continue again on Monday. So big up on yourself, have a great Saturday, and we'll talk on Monday. Lawful, always.